Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of All Access AM. I'm Billy Embody. Thanks for joining us as the college football season comes to an end with the national championship game tonight. Miami Hurricanes taking on Indiana Hoosiers. We've got a jam-packed show for you guys today, of course. Because of that, 6:50 p.m. Central Time tonight, Miami and Indiana will fight for that national championship, the end of the college football playoff. Will it be the end of the 12-team playoff as well? We'll talk about that. We'll opine on that just a tad because I'm also at the point where I don't know where I want this college football playoff to go because I honestly look back on 12 this year and think that's a pretty good number. Of course, there's an entire offseason to take a look at this for us, at least in the media. The deadline later this month for the college football playoff is looming for their decision on the 2026 football season. But the end of the 2025 college football season is nearing, and it's kind of a bummer every single time that the national championship game, of course, pops up on the schedule. I know that we're in for it. The offseason is here. I can spend a little bit more time watching hockey, which I got to do with my son for the first time on Sunday, a little afternoon game between my Tampa Bay Lightning and the Dallas Stars. His first hockey game, I tell you what, it was awesome. Take them while you can between that 1 to 2 age while they're free under 2. He's about 22 months. Just had a blast to end our weekend. And actually, the intermissions, pretty clutch because he got to run around a little bit, and that allowed him to sit a little bit more comfortably in his seat for the actual game. So had a blast this weekend. We're going to have a blast tonight watching this Miami Hurricane team on, friends of the ACC here on this podcast. So, of course, we've got a little rooting interest for the Miami Hurricanes to get this one done tonight. But also, don't make banking such a dud. Make it a blast. And when you have people that care about you, care about your family, that is the way to do it. And Security National Bank, our friends over there that support the Monday show, are the quintessential reason why they're so successful with their attention to family, with their attention to having fun. I was texting with our contacts over there, and it's always just a little bit of mix of fun, a little bit of mix of work and all of those things. So they take attention to your personal banking, your business banking, wealth management. They have all of those things to take care of your needs, your goals, and help you reach them as well. So give them a call, 402-344-7300. That's Security National Bank. Go to securitynational.bank for more information on how they can help you reach your financial goals. Appreciate you guys with us on YouTube. We had a huge YouTube Friday for us. We don't normally do too many reaction videos, but it's something that I want to do a little bit more of. And the Darian Mensah news from Friday is exactly that reason why. We had a lot of growth on subscribers off of that video that I did, just a little 15-minute live one. So we appreciate all of you guys who are new with us here. Subscribe to the show. Thank you guys very much for doing that. Please, if you're not subscribed to the show, either scan the QR code in the corner of your screen right now, or just find the button that says subscribe on All Access AM. Click that button. We'll be good to go. You guys won't get signed up for anything. It just helps us grow the show and grow those subscriber numbers to, again, help us out as we grow this ACC college football, college basketball show as we go live Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, 7 to 8 a.m. Central Time, 8 to 9 a.m. Eastern Time. Appreciate you guys in the chat jumping in as well. We got Pierce jumping in with ACC. That is what we do here on the pod. A lot of ACC conversation. And, of course, aviation. Good to see you again. Miami can't shoot themselves in the foot. That is exactly right. And I think that's where it starts for Miami with Carson Beck, Mark Fletcher, Malachi Toney, CJ Daniels, a lot of these playmakers on this Miami team. They have to value the football. Malachi Toney's had a couple of scary moments in this college football playoff with turnovers. That's got to be at the top of Mario Cristobal's mind against a team like Indiana that feeds off of those turnovers. You saw what it did to Oregon. Now, who knows if that would have changed the impact of Indiana, Oregon, but opening play, you can't have something like that happen, obviously. But you really can't have turnovers pile up over the course of a game against this Indiana team where Fernando Mendoza has 8 touchdowns compared to just 5 incompletions on his college football playoff run. The Heisman Trophy winner has been getting it done, but Indiana's run game can certainly make possessions obviously matter even more if you involve the turnover situation for those Miami Hurricanes, which they've kind of, whether they've been somebody's fault or not, have been prone to do at times. So with that, you've got to take care of the football. Indiana, Roman Hemby in that run game, one of the best in the Big Ten, and of course in the country, they're 12th nationally. They are going to wear you down with their physical style of play. And so when you turn the ball over, that doesn't turn into a just wasted possession. It turns into something that could take another 3, 4, 5 minutes off the clock. And that gives you one less possession, two less possessions, however you want to look at it. And possessions are going to be at a premium in this national championship game. With these two teams playing the style they do, possessions are going to be at a premium. They're going to be very valuable in this national championship game. This national championship game has a feel of some of those national championship or SEC championship, or kind of those heavyweight games we saw in like 08, 9, 10, 11, especially that 11 season, Alabama, LSU, those type of games where I don't think this game is going to be 6-3 or 9-6 or any of those type of games that we saw during that course of college football, where defense was at that level because college football is just too explosive now. But you are going to see, I think, a game that moves relatively quickly because of the drives and the style of these teams. I think both offenses are actually going to have a decent amount of success. I think we're going to see both teams be able to run the ball a little bit here. I think that's a credit to what Indiana's put together as far as Roman Hemby and that run game, and Pat Coogan leading the way up front there. And of course, I'm going to give credit to Miami and Shannon Dawson. I think will have no issue sticking with the run game in Coral Gables tonight, because, or not Coral Gables, in Miami Gardens tonight, because you're going to have Mark Fletcher. This Miami offensive line was such a dramatic difference between the two groups. I mean, you're going to see that up front, and it's going to be talked about not only on this show, but it's going to be talked about throughout the day. And I do love the national championship is game day is kind of like watching kind of the lead up to the Masters. You consume all of the coverage on a golf network, or ESPN is live from there, or wherever. Game day of the national championship is exactly like the Super Bowl in that regard. I've got the TV on all day in the house, and so you're going to see 85 million ESPN personalities and different personalities on there talking about every single angle of the game. And we try to have you covered here in an hour. That's what we try to do here at All Access AM. But one of the big points that I look at is that Miami offensive line, the size advantage. Just you think just kind of baseline for that group outside of James Brockermeyer from right here in Dallas, where I'm based out of. That 6'6", 320 type of range, and then you get up to the Markel Bells at 6'8" or 6'9", whatever he is, 345. It's just a dramatic size difference for this Miami team that they bring into this game up front. So I don't think Shannon Dawson is going to have a problem leaning on it and that run game, and whoever can establish the more physically violent offensive production early on, I think is going to set themselves up really well in this game, assuming that turnovers don't come into play, assuming that a game-changing play, on special teams with a punt return or kick return, a huge explosive offensively from one of these two teams doesn't come to the picture. That run game is going to set you up for success late in this game. And that is where Miami has to win in that regard. And almost if you're looking at this from Miami's perspective, you can have that turnover later in the game. You could have it in the third quarter. I think we're in for a close one. So don't get me wrong. It's going to be important that they don't. But if you've established the run, if you've established what you want to do as far as leaning on this Indiana defense, that is going to be really important. Miami is going to be without Elijah Lofton. He was ruled out on the injury report on Sunday. No surprise there. Xavier Lucas, the defensive back who got called for, I don't know what it's called, targeting anymore in the game against Ole Miss. He'll be out the first half. That's got to get fixed. That rule just has to get fixed. Games are too important, too much money on the line. All of these things, they've got to fix that targeting rule. And in particular in the playoffs, they have to. Of course, Miami did list Damari Brown, defensive back, questionable as well. So, but my point is, Miami's going to have to establish a run without Elijah Lofton out there, which we kind of knew going in as we got into this. But Indiana's defense entered the college football playoff number 2 nationally in scoring, 10.8 points per game given up, 4th overall, 257 yards per game given up, and this is where you're going to have to show all of this recruiting on the offensive line, all of these additions, and the depth that you have on the offensive line. This is where you're going to see the difference made is up front for Miami. And so I'm really intrigued to see how does Miami make this happen up front and establishes that type of dominance up front that you would hope, if you're a Miami fan, you see early and often, and that makes you feel a little bit better as you're looking to be the first team to win a national championship in your home stadium in the college football playoff era. And you're going to have a lot of this outside noise for a lot of these players, being from Miami, a lot of them, having obviously all the family and outside noise, kind of around this game all week long. I wonder if that impacts Miami at all. Do we see them come out, pressing too much or maybe even a little tight? I don't think they'll be tight. I think this will be a moment where they, run through the smoke, so to speak, and can see clearly and get right to work against Indiana. But you never know. And both of these teams are really good at winning the turnover battle for the most part. And Miami is going to have to make some things happen on the ground. They aren't the best teams tackling. They do tackle well as gang tackling, but both of these teams do have just kind of straight up issues tackling one-on-one. They're both among the nation's 20 worst teams in tackling, according to PFF. But Miami does, when they get into the red zone defensively, facing opposing offenses, they have a tendency to give up touchdowns in part because of that. They are one of the better red zone scoring teams in the for their offense, but they just struggle at times, to get guys down and force field goals. So that's something that Indiana, obviously in the red zone, their field goal kicker is very good. Beyond that, it's kind of a question mark. They don't really lean on him. We talked about that last week on the pod, but you have to get these players on the ground if you're Miami. And to do that, you've got to play with intense effort. We will get my prediction here in just a moment. A couple other notes that we want to look at here as Miami and Indiana get to face off. Miami's offense is going to face an Indiana defense that is very difficult to game plan for because they're so multiple. Mario Cristobal talking with the media this weekend, saying they're multiple on the back end, multiple up front. And so they really have, because of that multiplicity that they display, they have an ability to challenge your offensive line, to challenge Carson Beck, to get you lined up, but also ID all of the right fronts, make sure you're having the right person in your blocking schemes, whether that be pass pro, whether that be run blocking. That is something that we're going to keep an eye on really, really closely, and continue to watch in that regard. as we get into this game. Miami isn't going to have to face many players up front or on that defense as a whole for Indiana. They don't have insane depth, but what they do have is a high motor across the board. They have that ability to be versatile, which makes it hard to diagnose a lot of the defensive play calls that they'll roll out there, as an Indiana team. So Mario Cristobal said it best. So you're looking at a Miami team that has the closing speed, and that's why they're able to limit yardage as a whole very, very well because they get after it. They're fundamentally sound in that regard. They do not give up on plays, and they make sure that they're able to come after you in waves so that you can't hit explosive plays. So that is going to be very critical as we get into this one. I also think about some of the storylines around this game and Malachi Tony, who bought into the vision here at Miami to make this happen. Baby Jesus, as he is affectionately called by many, he's grown up in the shadows of Miami football, and so he gets it. He understands what this means, even as a true freshman. As programs from around the country came after him, he opted to stay home. Jeremiah Smith goes to Ohio State as a Miami kid, but when you look at a Malachi Tony and him staying home, there are the stark differences of these Miami Hurricanes, where the ones that have stayed home are now sitting here playing for a national championship this year. Obviously, Ohio State did last year, but it is going to give Mario Cristobal even more fuel, and you're going to have some of the faces back for that regard and why you should stay at Miami. So really interesting to see that. And then on the flip side, you got Indiana. You've got Fernando Mendoza coming home to Miami. Didn't end up being a Hurricane. I mean, you could play the drinking game about the mentions with Fernando Mendoza going to Mario Cristobal's high school and going to have all those ties to Miami. The city, of course, being a hometown kid, but also the ties to the program as a whole. Just incredible story there that he ends up being the Indiana quarterback and facing off against Miami in the national championship. But then Pat Kukin, Indiana's one of their starting offensive linemen, lost the national championship game last year as a Notre Dame Fighting Irish football player and winds up here in the national championship game again. And he said, quote, on Saturday, "It's kind of felt like the longest year of my life, but at the same time, I feel like I blinked and I was here last year. It's a wild ride, but it's been fun. It's really been fun." If he ends up winning a national championship, obviously very vindicated, but if not, it's certainly a really, really close career to getting one. So he hopes to finish his career off with a national championship. Finally, my prediction before we get into the rest of the show. I've gone back and forth a lot on this one, and Miami. I I wanted to talk myself into Miami because I think the venue, I think the storyline sets up for them, in a sense. But we've we've been able to diagnose this game a little bit, and I feel pretty solid about it as a whole now that I've really dove into it. And I'm gonna pick Miami to win. I'm gonna pick them 23-20. I think we're in for a pretty solid football game. Enough drives that eat up clock that we really see this game stay in that scoring margin somewhere. And that's a credit to both teams' ability tonight to run the football. I think Miami just has enough of that in regard to get it done. I think we see some clutch play. I think we see a game-winning touchdown in the final moments for this Miami Hurricanes team to put them over the top. I don't think it's in the final minute, but let's say that final 3-4 minute stretch, I could see them getting that one that pushes them, up, to a 23-20 type of lead. And we see where Miami can eventually impact the game, where that defensive line can pin their ears back and go get after Fernando Mendoza and maybe seal this game. Miami, a 7.5 point underdog entering on game day, according to BetMGM. The total set at 47.5. I do like Miami here. We'll see. Obviously, two very, very, very good teams with great storylines around them. I love Miami in this one, though. I really do like that pick. I just think both teams have had dream seasons. Both teams have had these moments in the college football playoff that make you say, wow, they can do it. They can really get this done. But I think Miami is the one that gets it done tonight in the national championship and wins 23-20 over Indiana. I think we're in for a classic. It's been that type of a college football playoff. We've seen some of the best games, in my opinion. We're in for it again tonight. So expect Miami to wear down Indiana in that regard. I just think they can, eat up clock with those double digit play drives that they've had throughout the college football playoff. That's a staple. I don't see that changing. And I do like Miami's special teams as well in this one. I really do. Indiana has struggled with punting. Field position premium when you have two teams that play as hard as they do defensively, and it's reflected in their production and their rankings entering the game. If we're going to see some stops defensively, the field position gained off of those stops going to be critical. And of course, Indiana struggled to punt the ball. Miami does have Malachi Tony hanging out back there. So what a game. I'm really looking forward to this. The last meeting between Miami and Indiana, 1966, when Miami won 14-7. I don't think it's that low of a scoring game, but when they take the field for this one on ABC at 6:30 and kickoff at 6:50 p.m. Central Time, 7:50 Eastern Time, I think this is another Miami win and going to be huge for the ACC if they can get it done going into next college football season. And it sets up the ACC for a not, better seat at the table. You really can't change that much right now, but it sets them up for, just maybe to be heard a little bit better going into the future of the college football playoff. We appreciate Security National Bank for sponsoring the Monday show, of course, but also we appreciate our friends at Sportsmo, and they revealed huge news to kick off really ACC play for college basketball, and that is that you can now send micro donations to your favorite ACC college basketball teams, both on the men's and women's side. So help grow the game in terms of basketball by supporting your favorite college basketball team with a micro donation on the Sportsmo app. That's Sportsmo, Sportsmo, to download the app and learn more about how you can help your favorite college basketball team.
College basketball hits different with Sportsmo. You tap, they score. You pledge, they drop a three. You give as a group, they win as a team. At this point, you're not watching a game, you're in it. Download the app, fund your wallet, and get in the game. Download Sportsmo. Power the play.
That's right. We appreciate Sportsmo for their support of All Access AM. Huge partner for us, and a lot going on in the transfer portal as well as with Sportsmo. We do have transfer portal news, and we're going to jump into that now. Again, we talked a lot, and it's a standalone video. You can go and find it on our page about Darian Mensah on Friday. And sorry guys, continue talking about Miami here. And we'll close this up and we'll put a button on this really quickly because I'm sure, look, it's the national championship game today. I'm not even going to apologize for it. But of course, a lot of Miami talk, but a lot of other news. Georgia Tech, Louisville, North Carolina just came across the ticker with a big commitment, a guy that I know really well. But let's talk about Mensah and these quarterbacks really quickly here. Darian Mensah, what they're able to do here is basically now jump out of the shadows of pay for play and jump into the spotlight. And Pete Nakos of On3, if you're not following him, obviously give him a follow on Twitter, set him on notifications this time of year as well. But has a story up at at On Three, and it's Miami once paid for play in the shadows. Now the blueprint for Mario Cristobal is a win away from the national title. And he went through a lot of the spending, a lot of the costs for Miami. This is believed to be one of the top rosters in college football in terms of spend. I believe Pete said that the Miami 2025 team is in the $30 million range. Really impressive spend there for Miami, and they're getting return on that. Of course, they're playing for a national championship game, and Miami has invested, and you have to do that. Dan Radakovich, he had a great interview on Inside Access with Andrea Adelson and David Hale, two great reporters over at ESPN. But he added in an interview with On Three, he said, "quote You can't do what we've been able to do without any resources. We're a small private college. There are some places that have 110,000 seat stadiums where they gather a little bit more revenue and probably don't put as much on the university. Institutional support has been great. You also have obviously these boosters that help get that institutional support in the right situation. So when you look at landing Cam Ward, when you look at landing Carson Beck, and now in all likelihood landing Darian Mensah, it takes millions to do that just at the quarterback position." And Alex Maribel, was quoted extensively in this interview with Pete Nakos. And he said, quote, "We don't shy away from it. It is what it is. It is part of college football. You bring the right kids in, but at some point in the process, the conversation has to be had. And not necessarily with me, but with the powers that be. It hasn't changed how I coach them. It's not changed how Coach Cristobal runs the program." And that is the hard thing is you do have NIL impacting some of these rosters that otherwise, maybe in the past might have been good under the previous college football era if you would have been able to assemble them in that regard. But Maribel went on to say, people can complain about it, but you either get with the program or you don't. And it's now brazen that you can go out and do this and talk about it so openly because nobody's going to do anything about it. And I think this is a disappointing, at the same time, area that we're in college football. The idea was that there was going to be, a cap, there was going to be, legitimate NIL in the future, and it's just not come together in that regard right now. And it really is something that I think we're not going to see changed until we, get this collectively bargained and all of those things. But Darian Mensah is going to be the Miami quarterback, and he's going to have a well-documented, very high salary in all likelihood, but nothing's really changed from reporting entering the weekend about where he's going to end up playing his, next round of college football. And I do want to say in the comments, and I appreciate all of you guys who did that. I was under the impression maybe you just kind of think a certain way about a certain player, that he only had 1 year left. He does have 2. So if Miami wants to have stability for a change at quarterback, they could, maybe lure him back to, Miami for this next season. But they are, going into his money year here. So could be 1 year, could be 2. But, Darian Mensah is just kind of the epitome right now of, when people have talking points around college football and maybe why it's broken a little bit, that is certainly one. And Duke's scrambling now. And I wish for Duke fans that might be on this podcast listening or listening to a replay that we had news for you, that we had the solving of Duke's quarterback's problems to share, and that somebody else was going to slide right in and take that. Right now we don't. And that's also a hard part. It's almost like, somebody retired from the NFL and did it suddenly, and all of a sudden that team has to fill a hole after having all of their plans in place and kind of been building around those plans. So it's a problem for college football. I'm not blaming Miami because, like Alex Maribel said, these are the rules in place. So, or the lack thereof, that dictate some of these moves. It'll be interesting to see if we see the floodgates open on some teams that very clearly are either one, trying to play by the rules, or B, aren't being as blatant as a Miami, as a Texas Tech, as an Oregon, as an Indiana this cycle, for example. And we see that turn up next year if we're in this same situation. Because, man, college football is just king of solving problems that aren't the most pressing problems, trying to figure out, okay, do they expand the playoff so more money can be thrown around? Just incredible. But didn't want to spend too much on Darian Mensah. It is status quo right there. He's at this point expected to be the Miami quarterback in 2026. Another quarterback in the transfer portal who has made his decision is an interesting one, heading up to Syracuse, a depth piece here maybe as Steve Angeli comes back from that torn Achilles. Malachi Nelson, former five-star quarterback. I think, Fran Brown and that Syracuse staff does a great job of finding some, misfit toys, so to speak, and ending up in Syracuse, at least for a year. We saw Jonte Cook end up there. He now transferred to Ole Miss. But Syracuse gets a quarterback in Malachi Nelson, a former highly touted quarterback coming out of high school. He did play at UTEP this past season, played in 6 games before being benched. 104 of 190 pass attempts, 55%, 1,100 yards-ish, 8 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. UTEP is UTEP. He's going to come be a backup for Syracuse, but I thought that was an interesting note that Fran Brown did at least take him. Miami did take a visit from the number 1 transfer portal offensive lineman as well, Jordan Seaton. Colorado transfer offensive lineman Jordan Seaton made it to Coral Gables on Saturday, and he had also visited Mississippi State, and then he was at LSU. LSU is looking to close this down before he heads to Oregon for a visit, and Texas also was expected to land a visit but did not end up getting that. Lane Kiffin and LSU has been working really hard on Jordan Seaton, but we'll see when the dust settles if Miami can get Jordan Seaton in there as a key piece to the future of that offensive line. He's the number 1 transfer portal offensive lineman out there. And, around the ACC, a lot of moves being made with players making these decisions. Louisville has had a really nice transfer portal run over the past weekend. They did land Tennessee transfer defensive back Caleb Beasley, somebody who I've at least had some dealings with coming out of high school. He made 26 appearances during his 2 seasons at Tennessee, served primarily on special teams, 28 tackles, a fumble recovery, and a PBU for Tennessee. He was a former top 200 overall prospect who now ends up going to Louisville. And the Cards weren't done. They did pick up another addition for their roster with Kentucky offensive lineman Evan Wibberly committing to play for the Cardinals. He's a 6th former Kentucky player to transfer to Louisville in the transfer portal cycle. He played for Western Kentucky for 4 seasons and then transferred to Kentucky for 1 season. He did not play, so he'll be a depth guy that Vince Marrow is bringing in after he was able to come over from that Kentucky program to join Louisville. So a couple of ads there for Louisville as well. And then Georgia Tech really getting in on the fun. They did add former Cal wide receiver Javian Plummer to the fold, and they get kind of a boost for whoever is the next quarterback over there in Atlanta as well. But when you look at his stats last year, 2 catches, 86 yards, and a touchdown. So big body wide receiver here, but didn't really do too much out there at Cal. And he is going to have just 1 year of eligibility remaining, maybe 2. So we'll see kind of how that goes. I know he played in 1 game in 2024, so maybe an injury there that might give him a 2nd year. And so Georgia Tech lands Javian Plummer. And then they also added USF defensive back Jonas Duclona. Kind of a tough one there for me, but they did pick up a commitment from him as well. And he's excited to play for Vinny Cincieri, but played a big role for the Bulls in 13 games in 2025, 35 tackles, 30 of which were solo, 3 tackles for loss, sack, interception, a forced fumble, and 4 pass breakups. So he gets added into the fold for Georgia Tech. They also added Cincinnati defensive lineman Tim Griffin, a really pretty well recruited prospect coming out of high school. They do get him in there, and he's a big frame, but they're looking to get a little bit more out of him this year as they get Tim Griffin on campus and start getting him into what is a new look Georgia Tech team. I mean, they've had a lot of changes not only on the staff but to the transfer portal. Melvin Jordan did announce that he's returning to Georgia Tech and withdrawing from the portal. He played in 11 games this season, 18 tackles, half tackle for loss, half sack. So they get a depth piece there back. They did add another wide receiver, Isaiah Furman from Elon, to the Georgia Tech wide receiver group as well. Another big body frame, 6'4", 200, and played in 11 games, 46 catches, 907 yards, and 9 touchdowns. A big play outside receiver comes up from Elon to join Georgia Tech. They did lose defensive lineman Landon Marshall and Blake Bellin, as well as DB Troy Stevenson, the fourth, to the transfer portal here as it closed on Friday. You might see some players everywhere, get into the transfer portal here late, but that's more of the compliance offices adding their names into that. But they did land Gavin Harris, another impressive transfer portal addition here for Georgia Tech to reform that tight end room. This is kind of the cherry on top here for Georgia Tech. He was at New Mexico State in 2025, 37 catches, 531 yards, and a touchdown. He's been productive throughout his high school career, and he does have just 1 year of eligibility remaining. And this is a Georgia Tech team that added Jalen Mbakwe from Alabama as well. Really talented, super talented player that they are looking forward to having on their roster next year. Georgia Tech did also make some moves here as the coaching staff comes into focus here. Georgia Tech is expected to hire Jafar Williams, who spent the last 2 seasons as the assistant wide receiver coach at Vanderbilt, as the next wide receivers coach for the Yellow Jackets. He replaces Trent McKnight, who left in December to go to Florida with Buster Faulkner and that whole crew. But he has on-field experience. So this isn't, young up-and-comer in a sense. He was the wide receivers coach at Temple for 2 years before being at Vanderbilt, and then at Virginia Tech for a few years as well. And he's made stops all over the country in different roles, and is now on Georgia Tech staff. So they do get that. And then former Michigan assistant Brian Jean Mary is being the focus of the linebacker position. And he coached at Michigan, coached at Tennessee, but he has emerged as the top target to watch there. And he's got 24 years of coaching experience, a big time type of coaching option here for Georgia Tech at the linebacker position. They've got to get that defense right for Brent Key to have success this season. It's just got to change, and they're going to have to be a very different team. And that's why they went out and got Justice Haynes out of the transfer portal to address that run game. They're going to have to, really, I don't know what Georgia Tech's going to look like next year, but looking at what they did in the portal, at least as it stands, without, adding a quarterback that you feel really confident in, it's going to look a lot different here in 2026 for this Georgia Tech team. It's going to be I'm starting to think it's going to be a pretty big step back. Couple other news and notes. Former Ohio State offensive tackle Justin Terry is headed to play for James Franklin of Virginia Tech. He spent 1 season with the Buckeyes after transferring in from West Virginia last year. He was a backup right tackle, so he drops down to the ACC in a sense to come play for Virginia Tech off of that talented Ohio State offensive line. So you'd expect him to figure in right away. So big pickup for Virginia Tech in that sense. App State transfer wide receiver Davion Dozier committed to NC State. He spent 1 year at App State, has 2 years of eligibility remaining after starting out his career at Arkansas. 20 receptions, 448 yards, and 5 touchdowns in 9 games this past year. He's from Alabama, and coming out of Moody, Alabama, was pretty highly thought of. 6'4", 205, comes into the NC State program to be a weapon for C.J. Bailey. Let's close with a couple of things here. The college football playoff expansion is still on the table, and the SEC would like to stick to 12, while the Big Ten would like to go to 24. The 16-team option is certainly out there as well. And, the conversation is going to be ongoing until the Friday, January 23rd deadline imposed by ESPN to make the decision for the 2026 season. And this is just incredible offseason fodder, because you can talk about this all day. 12 teams, 16 teams, 12 teams, 16 teams, 24 teams, and what this looks like going forward for the sport and what it would mean for conference championship games as well. That is a question that I have. If you get to 24, what do we do with conference championship games? Is that a straight up do you create that as a play-in weekend? Is there something lined up there where you eliminate those and you take the top 2 teams in conferences and they make it no matter what? There's certainly conversation around that. But why would the Big Ten not be betting on itself right now? The run that they've had, getting 2 straight national championships and now gunning for a third with Indiana. I mean, they should want more teams in. Their teams are advancing. Their teams are doing well. And a Big Ten source earlier in the week told On3's Brett McMurphy that they would agree to the 16-team model in 2026 if there was a commitment to expand to 24 teams a few years later. So that all said, I do think the 12-team playoff stays as is going into the 2026 season. And I think for a lot of that is college football, once you do something, you can't really go back and roll it back. And the college football playoff is a prime example of that. I think 12 is a really good number. If this is the model that we're going to have, 12 is a really good number. I think since it's been introduced, we've seen the right tweaks made to it as far as seeding. I think the making sure the conference champions are represented no matter what is important. And I think making sure that the 4 Power 4 conference champions are represented is important. And that's a change that they're going to make as well. And that way you do get the best of each conference in, and you reward conference champions as well. And that does help, kind of make sure we have a better overall pool when you have a strange year like this with Duke and the ACC, and you don't have a Tulane and a JMU in the game in the first round of the playoff, because really, for the most part, you're not going to see their schedule allow them to earn that spot. If it was a blind resume for JMU, for Tulane, they would not be in. But because they're the champions in the group of 6, they're in, in a sense. They're the highest ranked. And that's one problems with voters in a sense. You're rewarding the group of 5 in a sense too much, and you're the college football playoff committee, and you're rewarding those teams too much because you feel like you have to put them up there because they've had good enough seasons to win their leagues and be in that position. But in reality, the job is to rank the top 25 best teams. And so those teams felt like they have to be put in the top 25. And there are some teams in the top 25 they could certainly beat. But that's the key conversation there that needs to be had a little bit more is, yes, you could see a JMU or Tulane beat a team in the top 25. But very rarely on a college football playoff Saturday or Friday night or whenever they play the games, you're going to see those teams step up and go on the road and beat a major college football program. You're just not going to see it. But you don't have them earning their spot throughout the regular season, but you're seeing the College Football Playoff Committee feel the need to put them in the top 25. Number 25 should really just be reserved for whoever they think the best team is out of the group of 6, if that's what we're going to be doing here. Let alone if we get to the point where, group of 6 doesn't have to be included. And really we've arrived then at that point with a breakaway super league type of system that you really should create a bowl system, a college football playoff system that is similar for the group of 6. I don't know what you call it. I don't know what you do, but really, if you're sending your best one to the college football playoff, you could certainly find a way to schedule them as a final game for the insert group of 6 playoff system. You could play an 8 team, you could play some sort of round robin there to find a really cool matchup to play as maybe an appetizer for the main college football playoff. And then those teams would get an opportunity to battle it out as the best group of 6, and maybe it brings in more money for them. But the college football playoff system, I didn't think was all that bad with 12. I think the one tweak of getting the 4 Power 4 conference champions in there, no matter what, will be an important one that really helps position the playoff even better. I mean, think if a Duke at least got into the college football playoff as the 12th team or the 11th team, you'd have Duke playing at Ole Miss, or you'd have Duke playing at Oregon. At least you could see maybe something there. Now, Duke's resume isn't it's better than a JMU and a Tulane, but they did lose to Tulane and they lost multiple games, in the non-conference. So, but at the end of the day, they are going to have a better chance more often than not to at least be competitive in one of those 2 games. So I don't know. I don't think we're going to see what happened with Duke this year happen again, because the ACC is moving to 9 games. Who knows what their tiebreaker scenario ends up looking like, but it's a whole lot better than knowing what was going to happen to Tulane and knowing what was going to happen to JMU in both of those games and see it play out the way it did. And both of those teams basically get a glorified bye, and they were able to use that to then beat their next teams on their calendars. Ole Miss took down Georgia, and Oregon took down, and people are probably slamming the steering wheel, yelling at me right now, Texas Tech. So you have those teams that, when you don't get the first round bye, but you get a bye in a sense, it helped those teams this year. So let's create a better competitive situation there for those games. Let's close out with some ACC basketball conversation. The college basketball season in full swing. And let me tell you, North Carolina certainly has fallen to major fraud alert here for the college basketball season. There's no question about it. You look at what they've had happen to them over the course of ACC play, and they've lost 3 of their last 4. 84-78 loss to Cal on Saturday. We obviously talked last week about the Stanford win over UNC, but now you look at what's happened to North Carolina, and they've completely fallen apart here. And it's tough to watch for Hubert Davis and this team. So they lose this 84-78 game at Cal, and once again they're scratching their heads, wondering what's going on. The cross-country trip for North Carolina, a complete nightmare, as John Camden scored 20 points, and Day Ames and Justin Pippen added 19 each, as Cal had a 20-point lead at one point, behind a 54-point first half to beat North Carolina. A lot of issues for UNC right now, and they fall to 2-3 in ACC play. I would imagine they got to be really close to falling out of the top 25 as a whole. And that's disappointing if you're a UNC fan. And speaking of UNC, I did forget something. Caleb Jackson, former LSU running back, is looking down at my notes, and this popped up right away. But Caleb Jackson did commit to North Carolina. Former LSU running back, was a blue chip prospect out of Baton Rouge, 4-star prospect that I actually covered coming out of high school. Over the course of his time at LSU, he ran 82 times, 331 yards, and 4 touchdowns. I'm a big fan of Caleb Jackson, so I'm just gonna say this, and you know it might hit, it might not, but he is physically exactly how you'd love to draw it up as far as a running back goes, and maybe he finds some magic at North Carolina. And before we get too far into ACC basketball conversation, do want to remind you guys you can find the magic as well with our friends at Corporate Magic. Corporate Magic can create an incredible event, an incredible experience for you and your clients and your viewers that is unforgettable. If you need to produce an event that can be seen by millions and see it through to an incredibly high level, that is what Corporate Magic is there for. They can make this happen, and you can see your events come to life like you'd expect with an events team that has decades of experience, from planning to just adding all of the different things and elements that you'd expect from some of these event companies. Corporate Magic can do all of that for you. So visit corporatemagic.com to learn more, for more on what they can do for you, your business, your company, and what they can do to create a absolute game-changing experience for you and your clients and your shareholders and all those things. So make sure you check out our friends at Corporate Magic. We appreciate their support. There is no more magic left for North Carolina right now, it seems. That West Coast trip was just awful. And, Cal was able to force all sorts of problems for UNC. Now, Cal at the same time shot 14 of 26, 54% from 3-point range, and shot 50% from the field. Defensively, and we talked about this last week on the show, UNC has just struggled. And our friends at Inside Carolina, if you aren't following them, they've documented it very well. And all eyes now are on Hubert Davis. That's what Greg Barnes wrote on Saturday after the loss. And no one wants to see this end for Hubert Davis, but you're seeing an alarming play and level of play for this UNC team that has Caleb Wilson doing all sorts of things that are incredible and exciting for the league to have. But he had 17 points. Visar had 14 points, 10 rebounds, had a double-double. And Lee Dort at the same time, for Cal, was able to grab 12 boards. This was a lot of fight from UNC in the second half, but just a really disappointing result for these Tar Heels. And, start talking about Cal a little bit more. You got to give some credit where credit's due. Cal making things happen for themselves here as they get into I think a little bit better of a situation now in the net. They're now top 60, but North Carolina has also fallen a little bit down to 29 and is in a bad spot. I mean, this is not where they want to be by any means over there for the Tar Heels. So now Duke was also on the West Coast trip. They did get a win over Stanford, 80-50, a dominant first half defensively, in particular by the Blue Devils, held Stanford to just 19 points. And then, the two teams kind of woke up a little bit more offensively. Duke had 45 points in the second half, 31 from Stanford. Cam Boozer had another 30-point night, 14 rebounds. Incredible for him. He continues to just set such a standard nationally that we've seen, over the course of his career so far at Duke. And it's just really exciting to watch that all happened for the league and what he's been able to bring to the table. Other top 25 action in the league on Saturday. Louisville did beat Pitt 100-59, just dominant performance on the road there against the very sad Pitt Panthers, who were coming off that win over Georgia Tech. Ryan Conwell had 24 points. Michael Brown still out of the lineup for Louisville, so he's trying to get back, he says, but things are happening there, so we'll see. Virginia did go on the road and beat SMU as they were able to score 8 points or got 8 points in the final 2.5 minutes to beat SMU 72-68. SMU just could not find the Moody Magic on Saturday as their unblemished record at Moody Coliseum this year falls. Just too much DeRitter, Malik Thomas for SMU to contain. Offensive rebounds were killing SMU this game. Virginia was just a really, really well-oiled machine in terms of grabbing the ball on the offensive boards. And, it wasn't even at times the first offensive rebound. It would be a miss, and they'd grab the second and kick it out and hit a three. Just really disappointing if you're SMU because you had so many opportunities. Boopy Miller missed a three in the final seconds that led to a Virginia rebound. Jerron Pierre Jr. missed a kind of a shot he normally makes in the final moments that cost them. Samet Yigitolu played well on the defensive side of things, but just had so many opportunities, went 3 of 11 from the field, and all of them were basically right under the basket. So lots of missed opportunities. I thought Andy Enfield was almost positive in his post-game press conference, and you could tell he felt like, okay, with them being able to bounce back and find a way against Virginia Tech, and them playing as poorly as they did shooting the ball and having some of their key players still coming back from the flu, to see what they did against Virginia was actually, I think, encouraging for him. So maybe a little bit of optimism there from Andy Enfield as they now turn towards a Tuesday night matchup at Wake Forest, 8 p.m. Central on ACC Network. Closing out the rest of the Saturday slate, we love to talk about every team briefly here on the ACC basketball roundup. Miami went to Clemson, top 25 Clemson, and lost by 10, 69-59. Little John continues to be a really difficult place to play for opponents, but despite Shelton Henderson's 22 points for the Hurricanes, Carter Welling and that Clemson team was just too balanced, and able to, have a really good defensive effort to win that one. So Clemson continuing to play at a really high level, 16-3, 6-0 in ACC play. That was the first ACC loss for Jai Lucas and company. Virginia Tech did get a win. They bounced back 89-76 over Notre Dame, who came to Blacksburg to visit. Toby Lawal, 22 points in that one to lead all scorers. He also had 11 rebounds, so a nice night for him. And Virginia Tech, after a heartbreaker at SMU, gets back on the right side of things. Georgia Tech also bounced back, beating North Carolina State, a brutal loss for Will Wade and company. This is a quad 4 loss. You've got to give a lot of credit to Kawasi Reeves, 21 points on the night. Lamar Washington, 18 points. Too much Yellow Jackets for NC State, and they now fall to 3-2 overall. This is a really, really bad loss on the NCAA tournament resume for Will Wade and company. So I know he was ticked off after the game, but they're going to have to find a way to rally the troops there for the Wolfpack. Boston College gets a win in overtime. That's right. Boston College beats Syracuse. And if you want to see a program just get pissed off about a loss, it's definitely got to be Syracuse, following 81-73. It was an overtime loss, but the Qs falls to 12-6 overall, 3-2 in ACC play. BC's just 8-10 on the year, even with the win. Not what you want to see if you're a Syracuse fan in that one. Wake Forest edged out Florida State as well, 69-68. The Demon Deacons improved to 11-7, 2-3 overall in the ACC. Florida State now 7-11 overall, winless in the ACC. Really, really tough time to be a Nole in ACC play for the basketball side of things. Football was tough this year too. One last look at the standings here. Duke and Clemson both unbeaten at 6-0 in league play. Virginia at 5-1, Miami 4-1, and then a crew, NC State, Syracuse at 3-2, and then 3-3 Stanford, Virginia Tech, Louisville, SMU 2-3, North Carolina 2-3, Wake Forest 2-3, Cal 2-4, Georgia Tech 2-4, and then the bottom feeders Notre Dame, Boston College, Pitt, and Florida State sitting there. Finally, Tuesday night is when the ACC returns to action. We'll also preview the Wednesday games on our Wednesday show, but NC State does get back at it for this one. NC State at Clemson, 6 p.m. on ACC Network. Florida State at Miami at 6 p.m. on ESPNU Tuesday night. I think we are going to try to get a show out to you guys Tuesday morning. And so that'll kind of change the travel. That'll change this week for not only because of a little bit of travel that I'm doing here, but also might as well react to the national championship game as quickly as possible. So I think this is why you need to just stay subscribed to the channel. But I think we will be live Tuesday morning. So make sure you guys tune in, subscribe to All Access AM on YouTube. Please, please, please help me out. Do that. And that way you'll know when we go live Tuesday, 7 to 8 a.m. Central, 8 to 9 a.m. Eastern time. We'll be live reacting to the national championship game. So make sure you guys are subscribed for that. We really appreciate our sponsors, Security National Bank, Monday Show, Sportsmo, and Corporate Magic. Make sure you guys check them out. All their info is in the podcast episode description. And look, national championship, Miami, Indiana. Looking forward to this one in a big, big way. Hope you guys have a great night watching it. And we'll be back to recap the game and share all the things as Miami looks to win a national championship in its hometown. So looking forward to it. Hope you guys enjoyed this edition of All Access AM. I'm Billy Embody. Catch you next time, everyone. Have a great national championship.